Hey guys, this is John. Welcome to another installment of Climbing the Tactics Training Ladder. And how do you climb a ladder? Well, of course, you climb a ladder rung over rung, right? It's a process. You go sequentially, you don't take any shortcuts. And that's the approach we're using with these tactics. And you can see that after several videos and an hour and 44 minutes of tactics solving, my rating is sitting up at a nice 1901. But I don't really care about that number. And in fact, I won't care about that number for a very long time, if ever. The number I really care about is down here, this pass percentage. So that 97%. That's the number I'm particularly proud of, and I want to keep high, as close to 100% as possible. You can see that I've solved 76 problems correct, and I've got 2 wrong. I wish I could erase those 2 and add them to the 76 and make it 78 and 0. Because I promise you, if you focus on solving for accuracy, this number, your actual tactics training number and rating, will take care of itself. Okay, so don't worry about that whatsoever. Let's keep that in mind as we make a push towards some harder problems. All right, so let's get to solving. First problem, white playing a7, dangerous pawn, but white's king is nearly in a mating net. I could give a check here, but king f5, and then check f6, but I lose e5. So is there any way I can close this net? Maybe even allow white to promote? I could give a check from f3. Aha, if I check from f3, king f5, rook f6. That seems to do the trick, because on f3, the knight will be protecting the pawn. That's just a mate in 2, so let's go ahead and play that. And rook f6, checkmate. There we go. All right, so I used an approach whereby I looked at the forcing moves, as you want to do in virtually every tactics problem, any position, really. The initial move I looked at, knight e6, was not working because white can play king f5. One second while I figure out how to make a move here. Why is it being fussy today? I want to play knight e6. Oh, there we go. I was making the move before white had played a7. So yeah, knight e6 was my initial thought, but after king f5, rook f6, it's not checkmate. He can take the pawn on e5. White survives. So I just mixed up the knight moves I was considering and happened upon knight f3 check instead. Also, another move you might think about is rook g6. Maybe if black saw nothing else, they could play rook g6, king h4, rook h6, try to get the king to go to g3, but then the white king might be escaping. So just following the forcing moves, and one of the paths happened to lead to checkmate. Okay, next problem. Queen takes e3. So white has 2 minor pieces for the rook. This one would be nice to get. I wonder if I can play queen d4. And then after queen takes d4, insert rook takes c1 check. They can play queen d1, but then we take, and we will emerge up material. So this piece is really tenuously defended. Not defended at all, I should say. It's an undefended queen. Yeah, I think that works. Rook takes c1. Nah, it's got to be something having to do with deflecting the queen from the defense. So I'm going for this. Yeah, and now inserting this capture before going after the queen. And then we're up 2 exchanges. That's too much material. So the cue here was the fact that white's previous move, queen takes e3, defended the rook, but just barely. And if I could deflect that white queen, then the rook is lost. We've already got this attack. So naturally, you'd look at rook takes c1 right off the bat, but I didn't see rook takes c1, queen takes c1 leading anywhere. I don't even think I mentioned it because it was apparent to me that it was not going to lead to anything. But distracting the queen and being able to distract the white queen with check proved to be the answer. So queen d4 does the trick. And there's nowhere white can go that will simultaneously defend the queen and save the rook. Like rook c3 is not possible. We could just play rook takes c3 in reply. King f2, if white tries that, is going to fail simply due to queen takes e3 and then take on c1. So there's no defense for white. If rook takes c8, then we take the queen with check, followed by taking the rook. So a little deflection idea here with queen d4. Next problem. Knight d7. So we've got 2 bishops aimed at black's king. Immediately you look at bishop takes h7 check. Is that leading to anything? We check there, king takes, queen d3. Not sure there's too many follow-ups. King g8. This bishop is loose. Aha, maybe bishop c7. So we've got the rooks lined up. If bishop c7, queen takes c7, rook takes e8 is winning material. And if bishop c7, rook takes e1, we just take the queen. I'm liking that. Other bishop discoveries, bishop f6, there's knight takes f6, or pawn takes even. That can't be right. Yeah, let's go bishop c7. So deflect the queen, win the exchange. So bishop takes h7 was the move that caught my eye right away. This is a pattern. When you have two bishops lined up against a king, you may consider some sort of sacrifice, some permutation of a bishop sacrifice, or even a double bishop sacrifice, as happened in this very famous game, Lasker versus Bauer, the original double bishop sacrifice game. But bishop takes h7 was coming up short. King takes h7. I looked at one more check, and then king g8. But I don't like the fact that this bishop on e5 is loose, so I don't have time to play something like queen g6 threatening mate, because black just snipes this piece and survives and thrives. So the thing that was the tipping point for me was realizing that these rooks were in alignment on the e-file, and black's queen was the only thing holding the rook on e8. So if we can deflect that queen, we win material. And bishop c7 happens to be the way to do that. And nowhere that black can go to stay defending the rook. Kind of similar to the last problem, in fact. Next one. Okay, so this is a scenario where a king and a knight are probably going to checkmate against a king and a pawn because black is stuck in the corner. And to do this, I need my king on f1 and my knight on f2 delivering mate. And I think that's pretty straightforward. Knight g4, king h1, king f1, h2, knight f2, checkmate. That line is so straightforward that I'm just double checking it now to make sure. But yes, there's no way out of that. So let's give a check here. Force king h1. Here we're covering h2, so pawn push is forced. And now knight f2 checkmate. So if someone tells you it's impossible to deliver checkmate with a king and a knight, you can point them to this type of problem, where because it's a rook pawn and because the enemy king is so boxed in as a result, you can deliver checkmate. Black wishes their rook pawn did not exist, in which case it would be a draw. So a king and a knight itself cannot deliver checkmate against a lone king. Many of you guys know that, but when there's a rook pawn involved, there is that possibility. And nice forced line. So my previous knowledge of this type of pattern helped a lot in this one, as it does on many of these tactics training problems, but there was some calculation required. But you can tell I had that picture in my head of what the checkmate would look like, and that's a big advertisement for studying your tactics. I already knew that I needed the king on f1 and the knight on f2 with black's king on h1 and the pawn on h2 to complete the checkmate picture. All right. So looking at checks, we have knight e7, forces king h8. What then, though? Bishop takes g7? King takes g7, knight f5. That's a fork. That wins the queen for two minor pieces. Yeah, that looks good. We even pick up a pawn out of that. I think that's about the maximum we're going to get. We're not going to checkmate black here. We don't have enough resources attacking for that. Knight f5 is another move we could consider, but this is more forcing. Therefore, I like it more. So draw the enemy king into the fork and then bag the material. Not much more to that problem. The queen, actually, the only role that the white queen played is defending the knight on e7. So white could just as well have had a rook on e1 protecting the knight. So surprisingly, white's strongest piece plays only a very minor role in pulling off this combination. But that's a cool one. Knight e7 check. Only move king h8 other than queen takes e7, which would just lose the queen. And then bishop takes g7 check. Keeping the moves forcing. Keeping the play concrete. Yeah, and get this nice fork. White's up too much material. Follow your forcing moves. Those will lead you to the correct path in tactics especially. Okay, so the obvious thing is, can we take on e5? What happens if we do take on e5? Is white's plan f4 followed by trying e5 thereafter, trying to fork us? So bishop takes e5, f4, what are we doing then? Bishop takes c3. I suppose they're going to play queen takes c3. attacking the knight on f6, which is pinned if white has a queen on c3 because of the rook behind. Must be some sort of catch here, though. Maybe... Maybe bishop takes c3, f4... Or sorry, bishop takes e5, f4, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, just king e7. Defending the knight, preparing knight takes e4. I am not thrilled about having my king in the center, but for a piece, I might be willing to go through that trouble. f5 is possible then, but I have knight takes e4, and maybe I can pick up the pawn on f5 thereafter. Queen e5, that's getting kind of murky though. Seems like there should be something cleaner. So bishop takes e5, f4, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. I can play queen takes e4, attacking the bishop on e3, but there's bishop d4. What's up with that move? It seems to slow me down. So bishop takes e5, f4. I don't really want to take on f4. That may be part of the solution, but that opens the g file, so I'm hesitant to do that. I wonder if I can give up the rook somehow on h8, but that doesn't seem likely. Could it be some counterattacking idea involving taking on e4? I'm not sure. So if we just play bishop takes e5, f4, bishop d6, white's getting an e5 and winning their piece back. So bishop takes c3, queen takes c3 is still what I'm looking at. King f6, f5, knight takes e4, queen e5, maybe d6 at the end. Could that be it? d6 forcing the queen away, so there's no longer a pin going on the e file. It's pretty hard. Bishop takes c3, bishop takes e5, f4, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, king e7. Maybe not hard is the right word. It looks very risky what black is doing to try to save the piece. But then again, if I were in this position as black, this is exactly the line I'd be calculating. So the trainer is doing its job. King e7. And then f5, knight takes e4. It seems to check out. I don't see a refutation of it. And then that queen e5 move, and then d6 is what I'm liking. Maybe even f6 works there, but d6 is the move I especially like. Okay, I'm going to go for it. Let's take this guy. Bishop d4. Yeah, not even a move I considered. I only considered f4. I hate it when these type of problems occur. All right, so d6. Bishop takes e5, pawn takes. That's no problem. So d6, probably he'll play f4. But that's no problem either. We can take with check. No harm, no foul. Okay. And we passed. Only 1 point, but we passed. That's the most important thing. Okay, so I didn't like the variation that the program played against us, because on bishop takes e5, white's down a piece. It seems imperative that they either win the piece back or gain some sort of massive compensation for the sacrificed piece. And bishop d4 isn't going to cut it. Just proposing a trade. The only reason I didn't take on d4 thereafter is because after queen takes d4, so right here, if bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, they're on the knight on f6. It seemed far easier to play d6 and prop up the bishop on e5. So I spent all my time calculating f4 because that seems way more challenging. If bishop d6, e5, fork the knight and the bishop. But eventually I came to the determination that this, queen takes c3, and now king e7 should be working. Defending the knight and connecting the rooks, and threatening knight takes e4. And then if white continues with f5, trying to trap the bishop, we can play knight takes e4, attacking the queen. And it's kind of close, but I believe that black should be banking the material here. Queen e5 and then f6 or d6. Let's say d6. Yeah, and then the queen will be forced away. Let's say queen d4, and we can take here. Our king is exposed. I would be much more unhappy to see this line with f4 than bishop d4 if I was black in this game. Okay, next one. Queen h5, threatening mate on f7. Let's not blunder that. So we can take the bishop on c4, just get rid of that. This queen is very nearly trapped. Bishop g4 would work if not for queen takes f7 checkmate. So what if I just get rid of the bishop and then play bishop g4? That's a trapped queen, is it not? I believe so. Rook takes g2 is a forcing move, not leading anywhere. So I'm going with this. I don't see any other moves that white can throw in our way to distract us. Yeah, and he loses the queen. Okay, that's a great example of reciprocal thinking in chess. Basically, thinking backwards. This is one thing I talk with my students about a lot because I think this is the most important calculation skill in chess. And this prevents us from just analyzing in random directions. So I noticed a line, bishop g4. I noticed that it would trap the queen if not for that little problem of queen takes f7 checkmate, right? Like bishop g4 works beautifully if not for that. I mean, maybe bishop takes f7 check is another move, but queen takes f7 just ends the game. So what do you do at that point if you calculate that line? Well, you don't just go off in some other random direction. You try to use that bit of information that you picked up from bishop g4, queen takes f7 mate to strengthen the whole idea of bishop g4. That's crucial. You can't just, in one ear out the other with that piece of information. You have to use it. You can't just discard it. So that led me to look at knight takes c4. Truth be told, I looked at knight takes c4 even earlier, but not in any concrete capacity. So remove the bishop, and then after he takes back, because he's going to want to win back his piece, now this works, no mate on f7. So that mechanism, that cue that gets you to connect lines together, that's just crucial. And that's what's going to prevent you from just analyzing in all sorts of directions and getting confused. This is what distinguishes us from chess computers, for instance. Chess computers do not connect lines together like that, at least as far as I'm aware. They just brute force solutions. Maybe some of the newer engines are starting to do this, think more like humans, but we have to rely on our ability to efficiently identify the problem and get to a solution. And you want to resist analyzing in all sorts of directions whenever possible. It's a nice problem there. Okay. Queen takes f3. So obviously we can't take the queen. It's pinned. We've got this check here. He's going to go to b6 in that case. So I think we're either going to have to check the black king out or win this queen somehow, because we're facing an imminent mate threat. So queen d6, king b8. And then what? We have c5. We have queen d8. And we also have queen b4. All those moves have to be considered. Queen b4 is just a perpetual. Queen d8 check forces king a6. But what's my follow-up after that? I don't see any other checks beyond that. So queen d6 check, king to b6. Okay, I'm gonna short circuit my thought process because I think I found the right move. Queen a5 instead. And then if king goes to the back rank, we have rook d8 or queen d8. So b6 is forced. Queen takes a7, king c8 forced. And then it should just be a matter of queen a8 check, king c7, queen d8, king b7, rook d7, king a6, queen a8 checkmate. That takes several moves. There might be a faster mate, but I'm pretty confident in this. Yeah, b6, so take that. And problem solved. Okay, it could have gone on with king c8 to force us to find the checkmate, but I think it was there. King c8, queen d7 check, king b8, and then queen d8 check. King goes to a7 or b7, check on d7 with the rook, king a6, and queen a8 checkmate. So let's see that continuation in full. So check here, check here. Let's say king b7, check with the rook, force the king up. and mate. Our pawn on c4 does a nice job of controlling the b5 square. And we never had to navigate the queen and the rook on f3 and e2. So what happened there was I started looking at queen d6 check, king b6, and then I had these three other queen moves that I was, or two other queen moves plus pawn move I was considering. So queen d6, king here, and then either c5 or queen b4 check or queen d8. But they weren't really leading anywhere. And then it popped into my head that maybe queen a5 is better. So if I was being very thorough, I might have pursued these lines further before looking at queen a5. But in looking at some of these lines, somehow the connection was made in my head that queen a5 is probably just the answer, preventing the king from roaming too far. Because that has the major benefit that he has to play b6, otherwise he gets checkmated. If king c8 or b8, we're bringing a piece down here for mate. So sometimes you'll experience stuff like that. I think the big thing is just not to get confused with the lines that you're calculating. So don't get so wrapped up in a different line that kind of flicks across your thought process that you completely lose sight of the overall goal. I'm pretty experienced with switching between lines, but I know for low-rated players that's sometimes an issue. So always try to maintain your bearings. And if you can't maintain your bearings, you've probably gone too far and you need to start your calculation over again from move one. Okay, next problem. So white's up a pawn here, but it's a rook pawn. This looks like a theoretical position, like ending that I should know. But if I give a check here, I can just play my king out next move. And if check on c3, king b6, then king b8, threatening to queen. Rook takes a7, rook b3 check, king a6, rook a3. So yeah, we definitely have to start with that one. We got to force the king away. And now this. Yeah, get him to take the pawn and then give a check. And he steps right into the skewer. Okay, so black is done in here by the very poor position of the rook on a6. If the rook was anywhere else, I believe this position is just a draw. Like, say the rook is back on a1, they could play king d7, and it's difficult for white to win because king b7, there's rook b1 check. But here, if king d7, so if I go explore this problem, so if black backs off to the d file with the king, we're immediately bringing the king out and threatening the pawn promotion. But if the rook was back on like a1, let's say, black would be giving a check right now. So yeah, very unfortunate position of the black rook on a6. And the solution here, king b6, king b8. Let black take the pawn, but then give this check and eventually skewer. Moving right along. So white has two rooks for the queen, but we've got the queen and knight in close proximity to that white king. I want to move this knight so I can threaten mate on g2. And knight f4 is the move that just screams to be played. Because then even if he goes king f1, we can still checkmate on g2. He can't run to the e2 square. So if knight f4, he gets one useless check on c7, right? But after, say, king g6, he's out of luck. Yeah, I don't see how he's defending this. That looks straightforward to me. The rook is also undefended. We could look for something like queen g4 related, but it's not even worth it. Yeah, now white's going into kamikaze mode, giving up the rook, but will eventually get checkmated. So in this one, I suppose it's helpful to have previous knowledge of queen plus knight mating patterns. A queen plus a knight is a dangerous combination. And the reason why that is, you've probably heard that before. But the reason is, if you think about how a queen moves in combination of a rook and a bishop. So it combines the power of those two pieces. So when you put a knight in there, you have like a super piece, right? That's why a queen and a knight usually work better than a queen and a bishop. A queen and a bishop will duplicate some of the squares. Queen and knight, they don't do that. They complement each other very well. So here is just looking at the various knight moves. So knight h4 and knight f4. And knight f4 is better because after knight f4, as I was describing, if the king tries to run away, then queen g2 is still mate because the knight covers the e2 square. If the knight were on h4, the king would be getting away. All right. What is up here? This looks like some sort of study position. aka a position that is not likely to occur in a game. So black is threatening to promote. We just need to stop him from promoting, but it's hard. Knight d4 check, follow the forcing moves. What then? Probably king e4. And, we can't play the knight away because he's promoting with check. So where do we go after that? d3 check, just king takes d4. Nothing doing there. So knight d4 check, king e4. How do we avoid allowing promotion? Or do we have to allow promotion and just do something thereafter? Like knight e2, b1, queen, king f2. No way that's the answer, though. I would be absolutely shocked. I really wish my king was not on the back rank. Okay, we could start with bishop b7 check. That's the other forcing move. So bishop b7 check, probably king f4. Bishop e4. Make them take it. Then play d3 check. Could that be it? Followed by knight d2. That would stop the pawn, but we wouldn't win. It would only be a draw. So bishop e7 check, king f4. Bishop e4, king takes e4. d3 check is a draw. King takes d3, knight d2. Oh, no, it's not a draw, actually. We win that. We do win. So bishop e7, king f4, bishop e4, king takes e4, d3 check, key move. If king takes f5, knight d2, and I think we're going to keep the pawn. Yeah, we'll keep the pawn there and win. So let's assume king takes d3, knight d2. For some reason, I thought the black king was stopping the f-pawn, but that does not appear to be the case. It's a nice one. Okay, I think that's it. So bishop here. And now bishop e4. Knight c5 kind of crosses the mind, but d3 is the way to go. Try to get the knight to d2. Stop the pawn. And it's imperative that white keep this pawn if they want to win the game. And it does appear like white will get to do that. The problem was solved, but say king e5. If we just keep going here. King e5, knight b1, king here, king d2. We're going to get the king up to c3 next move. Pick up the b pawn, and then the extra knight is enough to win. If it was just king and pawn versus king, it would be a draw. Black would have the opposition, but white's extra knight will win it. So the first threat I looked at with knight d4 check was not leading anywhere after king e4. Couldn't even figure out how to stop the pawn. So fortunately, we have this other forcing move available, bishop b7 check, and that did the trick. And note, after bishop b7 check, it doesn't matter where the black king goes. So if king g3 or king g4, bishop e4 is still working, and it's working even better now because he can't take it, and we're still guarding the b1 square. All right, next problem. I see mating net ideas. Rook takes h3 check. King takes h3, rook h8. The king would have to come out to g4. And then we're tantalizingly close to mate. It's really, really close. Rook h4, pawn takes, queen g2 does the trick. So rook h3, king takes, rook h8, king g4, rook h4, pawn takes, king g2. You can go to h5. But then we have queen f3. That's a nice one. I like that a lot. Okay, that's all forced too. So let's give a check here. And queen f5 is a move as well, but I think rook h4 is better. Get the queen to g2. I'm just paranoid that I'm missing something, so I'm double checking, but nah, this is correct. There's also check here, but king h5 is a little tricky then, so yeah, let's go with our intended checkmate in 2 now, and queen f3. So just following the forcing moves, plain and simple. Rook takes h3, jumps out immediately. I mean, you expose the king. We've got a queen and a knight in fairly close proximity to the king. Maybe you'd consider f takes g3 for a moment, but rook takes h3 was the first move I looked at, and I just kept going with the forcing moves. Never let white have a chance to breathe. Must go to g4. Here it's just deciding between queen f5 or rook h4. In rook h4, I saw this mate. Might be some other way to do this too. Like I said, queen f5 there. But once you calculate a mate like that, you're probably not going to want to deviate from it, because here white can play king e3 and maybe scamper over to the queen side. So, nice sequence. All right, I'm going to solve a few more. Bishop takes g6. So they're trying to get at the knight on d5. We could throw in some checks, but the knight just gets captured. What about knight takes c3? That must be examined, right? Is the idea bishop takes f7 then? Because that would be pretty radical. Wow. Knight takes c3. So my idea is to just get rid of the knight so I can win the bishop back. But then he can take on f7 or h7, maybe. Knight takes c3. Let's say bishop takes f7 first. Then king takes f7, no fear. I don't know. Knight g5. Double check. King back to g8. Looks awfully scary. What about throwing in bishop h3 right away? Is there anything to that? King takes... I don't see much. So I might just have to do the hard calculation with knight takes c3 and see whether white's bishop sacrifices really amount to anything. If knight takes c3, bishop takes h7, I think I can just play king h8. I mean, I also maybe can take it, but king h8 is even safer. So knight takes c3, bishop takes f7 is the only thing that gives me pause here, because I can't play rook takes, I lose the queen. So king takes f7, I'm up 2 pieces. Knight g6, or sorry, knight g5, check. And there's various king moves, king g6, king e7, or king f8. All have to be considered. King e8 I don't think is good. So king g8 looks like the safest, but then there's queen b3 check. But I can check on d5 back. So on king g8, let's say rook takes f8. Queen takes f8. There's queen b3, though. Queen b3 is annoying in that instance. So probably not king g8. Probably king g6. So king g6 and then queen to c2. There's bishop f5. Rook takes f5, rook takes f5, g4. That's getting pretty deep in the line, but I feel that's important somehow. I think that's the path we have to embark down if we want to prove white wrong here. So knight takes c3, bishop takes f7, king takes f7, knight g5 check. Maybe king e7 is the safest. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't see anything. I was looking at king g6, queen c2, but king e7 might be the way to go. And then if queen takes d8, king takes d8. We're guarding the e6 square. We're still up a piece. White's going to have to pause to get that piece back. The king's a little exposed, but I think the line holds. So knight takes c3, and then I'm looking at the various captures on h7 or f7, but I think I hold in either case. Okay, let's do it. Yeah, he's going to take there. Now we got to take with the king. No fear. Queen takes d8 right away. Well, that makes things a lot easier. We'll just take back and we're up a piece. So once again, I looked at a line that turned out not to matter as far as the problem is concerned. So knight g5 check is the move that would be very scary here, instead of queen takes d8. Queen takes d8, you're happy, because after rook takes d8, black is currently up 2 pieces. White is almost certainly going to have to pause and take the piece back soon. So if knight g5 was played, however, I think king e7 is just a good move to sidestep. That seems to be safest. I didn't like king g8 because rook takes f8. We got to take with the queen now, otherwise he takes our queen next move. So queen takes f8, and now this reply is annoying. Check, and black doesn't have any good way to block. To block, we'd have to give up the knight or the bishop or both. So we'd have to play this, and then at the very least they get a perpetual like that. So I don't want that. But king e7, on the other hand, holds. And black is up material. Sometimes you have to do tough calculations like that. At the outset of this problem, I was trying to find something other than diving into knight takes c3. Like, I saw that knight takes c3 would be critical, but then before I got into that, I started to see if there was something simpler I was missing. And I think that's a decent strategy, because if you identify a line that is going to take a lot of your resources, a lot of your mental faculties, maybe you can spend 30 seconds before you start to look into it to see if you're not overlooking something simpler. Could save you a lot of time, and you might be right. Let's do 2 more problems. So take e5. We've got various checks, g5 and e4. Also knight takes e5, or rook takes e5. Yeah, rook takes e5 is possible. Pawn takes, knight takes e3 check. These queens are aligned along the 4th rank. So rook takes e5 is nifty. I see some ideas. There's also knight takes e5, but I like rook takes e5 better because the rook can maybe swing over to g5. That would be devastating if we get the rook and the queen both attacking the naked white king. Looks good to me. Better than anything else I'm looking at. I'd love to include these rooks. So I'm going to do this. Aha, queen back to c3, so white didn't even bite. So check here or some other move. Probably check there. That's going to win the h-pawn at the very least, and keep white on the run. Yeah, let's bring the rook over. Okay, and solved. So the reason this works is because if d takes e5, we have the discovery, knight takes e3 check, knight takes e3, queen takes b4. The alignment issue along the 4th rank proves very valuable to black. And here, one important thing is not settling for the first instance where you get to carry out your idea. So knight takes e5 was a move I saw even before rook takes e5. This wins a pawn, but rook takes e5 I think is better because we're bringing in the heavy artillery to bombard white with rook g5. Knight takes e5, I just didn't see where the knight was going. g4 and f3 are both covered, but rook takes e5, we've got a clear destination on g5. All right, last problem. King d7. Looks like we're on the verge of checkmating black or winning something. How to do this? Forcing moves, bishop e6. Just takes it. That doesn't seem right. We could play a queen move to threaten queen f5 mate. So let's say queen f4, threatening queen f5. What's that doing? I guess he can play knight e7 to develop. Are we down anything here? We've sacrificed a piece for a pawn. So queen f4, knight e7, queen takes g4, king d8. No mate. I don't think we're going to be delivering mate. But we have bishop takes e7 there. And then we can win the queen next move. So queen f4 is looking most promising right now. If queen f4, what if... Or, I should rephrase, what's the difference between queen f4 and queen g3? Is there one? Oh, obviously, queen f4 is better because it threatens queen f5 and queen takes g4, not just queen takes g4. So any other defense for black after queen f4? None that I'm seeing. Knight f6 maybe, but bishop takes f6. We win a boatload of material there. That can't be good. Yeah, queen g4 is just a big threat. Queen f4, what about knight c to e7? Okay, that's a move we have to look at. Queen takes g4 check, king c6. We have bishop e8 in that case. Nice move. Preventing the king from running to b5. Bishop d7, queen takes d7, or bishop takes d7 mate. Nifty. Okay. Queen f4. Could he play knight takes d4? Maybe. That's possible to try to give the king the c6 square once again. That time that line won't work because the queen will be helping out. But I gotta believe queen f4, knight takes d4, just c takes d4 is good. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of threats that white has. Taking the pawn on g4, rook c1 maybe to cut off the king. But I also want to be pretty certain about this. Queen f4, knight takes d4. I wish queen g4 led to mate. Ah, maybe it does. Queen g4, king c6, bishop d5. Oh, it's so close to mate. Yeah, that's probably good. And then take the knight on d4 after that. So I'm going to go for this. Ooh, I solved it. I got concerned there for a second. But yeah, solved it after with just one move. So just to illustrate a couple of the lines here. After queen f4, if they play a developing move, knight e7, there is queen takes g4 check, king d8, and now bishop takes e7 with the discovery on the queen. Just go pick the queen up next move. If this knight goes to e7, then take king c6. Remember, king d8 will fail for the same reason. Bishop takes e7. And here we have this lovely bishop e8 move. Bishop d7, only move, and then take the bishop either way. Checkmate. So I think the problem maybe could have gone on a little longer. Knight takes d4. I don't see a direct mate in this case, but it's pretty darn close. Yeah, bishop e8 is not working. I think I would have played queen takes g4, king c6. And again, bishop e8 doesn't work here because now the queen is, in fact, participating in the defense. But bishop d5 just drags that black king out further. Let's say king b5. It's really close to mate. I mean, a4 check is probably going to mate soon. Yeah, something like king a6 check here, b4 checkmate. All right, so summing up the session, we started at 1901 and ended at 1980. So I think last session we gained about 100 points, a little less this time. But again, we're going for accuracy, so we don't mind. And solve some pretty nifty problems. I liked a few of those. They're getting harder. Gradually, they're getting harder. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Keep climbing your own tactics training ladder. Let me know how you do. And also let me know if you have any questions about the problems that I solved in this video. All right, guys, have a good one, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.